listening to Muslimish Freethinkers, a podcast dedicated to fostering conversations on matters of faith and disbelief.
Welcome to Muslimish broadcast celebrating Darwin's Day. This is Wissam Sharafuddin, and I have with me in the studio, the virtual studio, Suhan D'Souza, Dr. Adnan Jaber, and Mr. Johnny. Welcome all to this live broadcast.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Darwin Day was on February 12 and is celebrated every year as the birthday of an extraordinary scientist who asked some bold little questions about the origins of life, why and how. So much of what we know about our place in the universe rests on Charles Darwin's questions and his courage in publishing answers. The importance of questioning cannot be understated. In fact, every new league traveled on the moral arc of justice rests on the contributions of questioners equally brave. I myself have been influenced so greatly with Charles Darwin. He may be, or the theory of evolution through natural selection, one of the most influential things in my life. As an engineering student, I had the least exposure to biology and less exposure to the theory of evolution. Growing first in the Middle East, where the theory is pretty much dismissed and discussing it is frowned upon or questioned suspiciously, I heard no mention of it in any science class or anywhere else. I also was a student of Islamic studies who dedicated a big portion of his youth studying and teaching Islam's theology, history, jurisprudence, Quran, and Hadith. The subject of evolution is not present anywhere in Islamic studies naturally. Is Dr. Adnan having issues? Nevertheless, a discipline that positions you supposedly to answer any question from a religious audience does not train you on saying, I don't know, as much as training you on finding answers from the Quran or tradition. Hence, when an imam is asked about the theory of evolution by one of the members of congregation, the answer that I used to hear is, son, this is a theory that has been disproved long time ago and is no longer considered valid. This was a mere lie, or a complete false, I come to learn later. What exposed me to the theory of evolution and caused me to change my understanding of life was a question in 2008 that coincided with the discovery of the fossil Lucy. Lucy is the common name of AL288-1, or Australopithecus, which is several hundred pieces of bone fossils representing 40% of the skeleton of a female of the hominin species Australopithecus afarensis, discovered in Ethiopia in 1974 and dated to about 3.2 million years ago using the potassium argon radiometric dating method. The fossil assembly and research was completed by 2007. Yes, 33 years of scientific work, including a 13-year suspension of the research due to lack of dating technology, and it toured the United States after that for 6 years. At that time, I was the chairman of the Institute for Religious Studies, Humanities, and Dialogue, Irshad. Then I was asked the question about Lucy. Could not find the answer within the Islamic resources, and the scholars members of the organization did not have satisfying answer. I started a research called Islam and Evolution and ended up with a new discovery. Once I understood evolution, the empirical argument from beauty fell, argument from design fell. The way I see the world now with scientific lens has changed, a beautiful lens, a more wonderful place. As Richard Dawkins says in The Unweaving of the Rainbow, I believe that an orderly universe, one indifferent to human preoccupations, in which everything has an explanation, even if we still have a long way to go before we find it, is a more beautiful, more wonderful place than a universe tricked out with capricious ad hoc magic. I would like to start this program by uh, getting the retrospective of each one of the members on this panel about their personal experience growing up in the Middle East, which we all have in common with each other, and being exposed to the theory of evolution at different stages of our life, how it was and how it is today, and the effect of Charles Darwin on our life as Muslimish people. We'll start with Suhan.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. And well, growing up in Dubai as I have, um, evolution wasn't really covered to really any depth in school. Certainly, things might have changed now. Although in Richard Dawkins' recent visit to Dubai, while he commended some of the good aspects of the place, he did note that it still seems to be the case that evolution is not really a solid part of the educational foundation there. As for me, having been always really interested in science and from a very young age, um, my my real interest in evolution began blossoming when I began questioning religion in general. It was kind of a feedback thing, you question what are these precepts that were told to you about how the world began and everything, and then you start investigating more and looking at evolution and such with an open mind, and that raises further questions about the religious precepts, and that just kind of cycles back and forth until the religious precepts, at least for me, at least the dogmatic way of presenting it, withered away into nothingness. I think perhaps maybe there is some room for theistic evolution if you compartmentalize well enough, as Francis Collins and others have done. The head of the NIH, until recently head of the NIH. I mean, he was part of the led the sequencing of the human genome and everything, and certainly very accomplished. And he's just one of many accomplished theistic evolutionists. Although certainly it does, I think, raise difficult questions about what a deity would want with evolution, or that kind of way of bringing about humans. But of course, I mean, we might get into that later. But yeah, that's I guess my experience with coming across evolution and its interaction with my questioning of theism.
Thank you, Suhan. Johnny, what is your side of the story?
So I just like to make a clarification. I'm probably the only member of the panel that was not born and raised in the Middle East. I was born and raised in the United States. However, I've traveled to South Asia, significant portions of my youth especially. I think I'm a unique upbringing in the sense that although I was raised Muslim, my father was a physicist, a scientist, and he came to the United States at a younger age, in his late teens, and he believed in the theory of evolution, and he did not really follow the orthodoxy on that sense, though he understood that a lot of these people, and he would, we would make fun of that growing up, but he understood that a lot of the preachers, the mullahs, the imams, what have you, did not believe in the theory of evolution. We grew up with the idea that obviously the theory of evolution makes sense, not only because a lot of people believe in it, but because we can observe it. And as a scientist, the first thing one takes in is the observations. And then you come up with your hypothesis and you test your observations against that hypothesis. And at some point, when you have enough data, you have yourself a theory that best describes what you already observe. And to me, that's a very important distinction. And it influenced my life growing up, because we also in our family looked at those things. And Sohan, you brought up the idea of how you can compartmentalize. Well, my father was a religious man. He prayed 5 times a day, but yet he completely believed in the theory of evolution. And he did not believe that the Quran's story of Adam and Eve was a literal story. And it was an interesting way because, as you said, a lot of the leaders and the preachers in the Islamic world that we listen to say otherwise. In fact, not just against the theory of evolution, but some of them actually believe the world is flat. And so seeing both sides of that is probably what made me question the most, because it was built into my DNA, essentially, as evolution is concerned. And I left Islam in a different way than most people, that I didn't leave because there was a sudden aha moment. It was more like, it just doesn't make sense for me anymore.
Thanks, Johnny. And Dr. Adnan Jaber, he grew up also in Lebanon, and today he is himself a scientist, a holder of a PhD in clinical psychology. Dr. Adnan, what was your experience growing up, being exposed to the theory of evolution in the beginning, and then being exposed to it again later on in life with a better understanding?
First, I am sorry I missed the beautiful video you shared with us. I wanted to really listen to.
I haven't shared it yet, so you're still.
Oh, okay, good. I grew up in an environment, what at least around me was secular. My father, who was a teacher, he had the Darwin's Asl Anwa', the book, the first book, on
The Origins of Species.
The Origin of Species, yes. It was available for us in my house, but from the get-go, I realized that not only people who were religious, but even people who were atheists, people who didn't believe in God, for different reasons, kept repeating the mantra that Darwin, there was this idea that was believed by not only religious people, by a lot of people, at least by experience, that evolution is not a valid theory because it's a theory, and evolution was debunked. And in the United States, it's rarely used in the West. So when I came to the country to study, and I started my studies in psychology, and I started to get exposed to different fields, I was surprised at the beginning that this talked about Darwinism, right? That evolution and evolutionary theory actually applies not only to biology, but applies to very disparate fields in the country. And not any single field that considers itself scientific does not rely on Darwin. It's just the opposite. So there was this kind of like, what's going on? How come people who are scientific, who have degrees, doctors, back at least in Lebanon, they kept repeating that, and I think that's what we need to talk about today, is that there's a concerted effort made in these countries to create a narrative and say that evolution is wrong and Darwin was wrong, and it became something like unquestioned reality for a lot of people.
I find that very interesting because modern medicine and genetics doesn't work without evolution. I mean, if you remove the phenomenon of evolution, genetics falls apart, and yet these same people, they're willing to do work on vaccines. You see doctors working on vaccines that don't believe in evolution out in the in Middle East or in South Asia and stuff, Indonesia. People don't believe in they don't believe in genetics. I mean, they don't believe in evolution, the foundation of genetics, but here they are willing to talk about breeding of animals and who they're marrying and what traits they want to see. I mean, all of that doesn't exist without evolution. So it's always been interesting to me on that side. That's interesting for you, I can assume, Adnan, growing up, hearing that evolution is not real, even from other scientists and doctors in your life, and then coming to the United States and going, wow, or Europe, Eastern or Western Europe, anywhere where, or even within the Middle East in certain educational circles where it's not just like, oh, is it a theory or that? It's the phenomenon of evolution is just understood to exist. We see it, we can observe it.
First of all, I'd like to welcome all the viewers that are watching us. There are currently live viewers from Dearborn blog on Twitch, believe it or not, on the Muslimish member groups, on Dearborn blog, Facebook page, on Muslimish Facebook page, on Muslimish YouTube page. So we welcome you on any platform that you're in, and we welcome your participation in this broadcast through the comments section. So please do tell us your thoughts, and if you have any questions to the panel or you'd like to give us your story too, please do share it. Before I continue, I want to show a video clip that kind of represents the mainstream notion that is like the mainstream idea or perception of evolution in the Middle East by a scholar called Zakir Naik, very popular scholar. Is an Indian Islamic televangelist and preacher.
Oh, Zakir Naik? That guy?
Zakir Naik, yes.
Yeah, that guy's a clown.
So he's one of the people who have focused on basically televangelizing Islam and standing against all the secular movement in the Islamic world. So we're going to show this video clip, and then we will get back to the panel and discuss it. So bear with me, guys.
Darwin's theory of evolution. I know there's a lot of controversy on that, but why do you believe in evolution, or you believe man was placed directly? And the whole thing of apes, the science that has proved that human beings emanated from apes. Do you agree with that?
Brother, asked a question that science...
2 questions, sorry about that.
No problem. Then do you believe in Darwin's theory? Science has proved that human beings have been evoluted from ape. Do you believe that human beings are placed? Regarding a correction in your question, science hasn't proved that human beings have been evolved from ape. It is Darwin's theory, not Darwin's fact. It's a theory. There is no book today. There is no book today on the face of the earth which says the fact of evolution. It's theory. The fact of the origin of human beings. No, it's theory. And for your information, Darwin himself said that there were missing links in his theory. If you read his book on the origin of species, he writes in this on a ship by the name of HMS Beagle. He goes to an island by the name of Calotropis, and there he sees birds were pecking in niches, in holes. Based on the holes they pecked, the beak of the birds became short and long. Based on that observation, he propounded the theory of natural selection. He wrote a letter to his friend Thomas Thompson in 1861 that I have no proof for my theory of evolution, but because it helps me in giving replies to embryology, to genetics, that's the reason I'm propounding. He had no proof on it. That's the reason in our school, to joke around, we used to say, if you were present at Darwin's time, Darwin would have been proved right. Trying to insinuate, I'm telling my colleague, he's an ape, he's a monkey. There were missing links. Furthermore, all the 3 stages today, science and advance, we have come to know that the first stage, the Australopithecus and the Iceman. The next stage that we have, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon. All these stages that we have today of the human being that we found, there's no link between them. Certain things what Darwin said, that life is evolved from water, I agree with it. Quran says that, Surah Anbiya chapter 21 verse number 30, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ hai. We have created every living thing from water. I believe in that. But saying that we have evolved from one species to the other is a hypothesis. According to molecular biologist Francis Crick, he said it is letting your imagination run too wild to say that we have been evolved from apes. If that was true, today we'll find someone in between man and human being. You only find in mythology. You don't find anywhere in the world a monkey man. Do you find? So what? Do you think evolution has stopped now? It is a hypothesis, and most of the scientists today disagree with it. There is only a small negligible percentage which yet believe in Darwin's theory. Majority of the scientists have already disproved Darwin's theory. I feel your knowledge of science is not up to date, brother.
Trying to stop it.
Please.
So believe it or not, this is the prominent notion about the theory of evolution in the Middle East. If someone asks, and I've heard that being asked when I was younger, about the theory of evolution, one of those things that he mentioned usually comes as the answer. It's only a theory. Scientists
but
don't
he
believe
says it
in
himself in his own statement.
Yeah,
he says the word hypothesis.
Missing links, intermediaries, these are the usual, which basically are, as for a person who's scientifically literate, there are signs that a person does not understand the theory of evolution. Nevertheless, he has 3 million subscribers and over 20 million views on this. So have you heard, I want to ask you, have you heard these in your lifetime, and are they something that is acceptable in the in Islamic countries in the Middle East?
I got a question for anybody who says it's a theory. There is a theory of gravity. Gravity exists. It falls. We know that there's gravity. The theory is, why does it fall? Evolution is exactly the same way. We see evolution. We see the phenomenon. We can observe it in micro stages, and we can observe it in the fossil record. And there's all sorts of evidence since Darwin that was 100 years ago or more, 150 years ago. We've come a long way since then, and the amount of evidence is staggering. But the theory of evolution describes why evolution happens. Natural selection, the survival of the fittest. And as that has grown, it's not just Darwin's theory. Darwin's theory has been expanded upon. The theory of evolution is extremely advanced relative to the early days when Darwin had first wrote his Origin of Species. Evolution is observable. The theory is, why does it happen? Gravity is observable. The theory of gravity is, why does it happen? That's my statement on the theory, which is they don't understand what the word means.
Mm-hmm. So, Han, your comment?
Yeah, very, very well said, Johnny. And I also want to bring up two things that he mentioned, which are kind of related, although one is at the beginning and one is near the end. So actually, this was part of the question, like evolving from apes. And the terminology is a bit murky there, but depending on what you consider an ape. I mean, where the extant apes, the apes that exist now are our cousins. They are not our ancestors. I mean, otherwise they'd be millions of years old. So that's to use more precise language.
We share a common ancestry.
Yeah, we and the species of ape that exist now share common ancestors, and there are these branches, these divergences, right? Multiple divergences going back to the common ancestor of like all primates, all mammals, all synapsids, back to multicellular life and tetrapods and multicellular life, and all the way back. So it's kind of similar to a question you'll often see on Christian anti-evolution arguments. Like, it's usually phrased as, if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? That's like
We didn't
kind of
involve
conflating the monkey, the stem monkey, let's say, the common ancestor, with our cousin monkeys, or because we have grandparents, and can have grandparents and cousins.
Hold on,
There's
I
no
want to just
conflict.
be clear 1 second, and I'll let you continue. But monkeys and apes share a common ancestor that is neither monkey or ape. Monkeys are not even first cousins with us like apes are. They're second or third cousins. They share an evolutionary branch farther back than apes. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good way of phrasing it. Pretty much what I was gonna expound on. So yeah, that's maybe an issue of also the way evolution education is done in schools. Often it's not very clear on this, like, and ensuring that proponents of evolution, unless they're like professionals and academics, tend to be more precise about this. But often in the popular parlance, we say, we came from apes or whatever it is, and that's, I mean, maybe that's something that also needs to be fixed, so that you don't go into asking questions of Zakir Naik and giving him an opening like that.
Yeah, it's I'm not creating a platform for Zakir Naik. He doesn't need me, but we wanted to actually bring something from the mouth of these preachers that
I'm a popular
speak right,
person.
and this is basically, we hear that this is unfortunately is mainstream, and it's part of the lack of education, or lack of scientific education, proper scientific education. There is a lot of, and by the way, this is not only an Eastern problem, it's also a problem in the West, when there is a resistance towards the teaching of the theory of evolution, and a proper teaching of it. Sometimes the system of public schools have made it part of the teaching of biology, but is it taught the proper way? Sometimes
That's a
teachers
good point,
do not deliver it the proper way, either because they don't believe in it themselves, or they fear the parents of the students. They fear stakeholders. They don't want to create controversies, so they kind of brush
Yeah, I
through
mean,
it.
I also think that our school system here in the West is not designed to teach us about the more larger questions of life and creation. They're here to teach us how to become workers, right? And so if you had to teach science the right way, you would teach before you get to biology, before you get to geology, before you get to physics, before you get to any chemistry, before you get there, you need to teach the language of science itself and understand what the word hypothesis means, and what the word theory means, and the scientific method. And these are the things that I think are taught, but they're taught and they're not stressed, in my opinion, stressed as this is the foundation you are building that the rest of your scientific journey is going to take you on. And without this base foundation, everything you hear is going to go through one ear and out the other.
Dr. Adnan, it's only a theory. What do you say to that?
Where do one start? There's so many. I don't know. I would say, I think, intentional lies to create confusion. First, I just wanna. I don't know if that's true, but I don't know if the people who ask questions are fed the questions beforehand. So the person who was asking the question, when he said science has proven that we emanated from apes, already you started with a false premise, the question, which you guys addressed correctly. I want to go back to two things first. The definition of theory. We have a scientific definition of theory, and we have a colloquial, right? Something that we use all the time. So someone might say, if you're asking them a question, I have a theory, right? It's a hunch, like it's a conjecture, it's a hypothesis. That's completely different than the word theory when it's used in a scientific way when describing a theory. or an area of study. Darwin himself was really a fan of Newton. You know, his main kind of like hero was Isaac Newton. You know, and Isaac Newton is the father of, if we can call him actually, the father of the scientific method, especially more recent ones. Isaac Newton is the one who actually came up with a theory and, you know, collected observations, systematically collected all these observations, and then said, this is the best way to explain them, and then made predictions based on this theory. And those predictions later, you know, came true, most of them. You know, no theory explains 100% of the facts, right? So one of the reasons Darwin waited that long to write his first book is actually he wanted to have a solid foundation to his theory. You know, first of all, he did not only collect data about birds pecking certain places and then based a theory in that. That's so simplistic. The voyage in the Beagle took about 5 years. He went from different islands and areas in South America to the Galapagos Island, you know, and he took him about 4 or 5 books before The Origin of the Species where he wrote about his findings. So this guy was systematizing his findings and writing them. Now, that tells you how much he took time to actually formalize his theory. The second thing that I felt he made it, and people probably don't know that it was wrong. He said that he responded to embryology and genetics. Those were not areas of study at the time. Embryology is a new area of study, and genetics is the 20th century. So he said that Darwin was responding to people from these fields, which is idiotic because those did not exist at that time. You know, so there was a lot of misinformation, and you know, if you don't know any better, you eat it. You take it as, you know, this guy has authority, has a platform, and can reach millions of people, as you said, and he's feeding them a lot of false information about the theory, like Johnny said earlier. First of all, nowadays we have the new synthesis, which began in the 20s and 30s, which combined genetics, microbiology, and microchemistry, you know, that is the base of evolution. Even Darwin himself, he had 6 editions from The Origin of Species. He kept refining it. So it's not a static thing, you know, and yeah, we might be talking about, he admitted he was really scientific. He said, yes, the gaps in the fossil record is an issue. He admitted to that. He didn't hide that. You know, but that's not an issue because evolution is based not only on the fossil record, based on genetic similarities, based on microbiology, which are very advanced nowadays. So, yeah, you can attack The Origin of Species because it was not a perfect book, of course.
I mean, people are finding their long lost siblings on stuff like 23andMe. They're finding people who they don't even know are their relatives. The theory of evolution, which is the basis of genetics, is very much proven because people across the globe are finding each other, not knowing that their parents had children before, gave them up to adoption or whatever. They're finding their siblings. This is happening. So it's like saying the GPS system doesn't prove the theory of relativity and Einstein's theory of gravity, when the clocks have to be changed from the ground to the ones satellites in space. We know that the theory of relativity at least is accurate to some nth degree because we have to do it. Otherwise, the GPS system wouldn't work. We know this is happening. We're observing it happen. That's the thing people don't understand about this is they keep, and the theory thing, they keep talking about this word, the theory. They keep talking about the scientific method or whatever. All that stuff is irrelevant to the fact that we have observed evolution. It's like me dropping a ball from the sky. We've observed it happen. We know there's something happening there. We don't know why it's happening, or we do with the data, but that may change and get more refined as time goes on. Even like you said, the 6 books, he refined his theory over the course of 6 books, and we've refined that theory even further over the last 150 years.
For sure, and it continues to be refined. But the amazing thing, and I was shocked. I remember we visited in we actually had a Muslimish conference in Chicago, and we visited together the Chicago Natural Museum. This is early on, like 2012 or 13, and when there were when I heard the number that there is in the Natural History Museum in Chicago, there's over 100,000 fossils pieces. And then imagine how many pieces of fossils that are documented, that are actually studied and documented, and all over the place. Actually, here in Ann Arbor, we have hundreds of thousands of fossils that are documented in the Natural History Museum and in the other museum at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. The vast number of these fossils that are in the tens of millions all over the world.
And you know what's cool about that, Wissam, is that it takes a very specific set of circumstances, especially prior to humans burying their dead. So if you go back before that process, which started pre-human, by the way, the burying the dead, so those special circumstances are rare. And even with that rarity, right, because we've had 3 billion years of life on this planet, because it's such a long period of time, there's millions, billions of fossils in the record. And even though that only maybe 0.01% of the species that have ever existed have left us fossil remains, we still have that much evidence. That's what's so amazing.
Right, but what's amazing to me is that all this record, vast record, every single piece of it is an evidence. It lines up into the theory of evolution, does not contradict it, does not disprove it. It lines up to that model.
Not once.
And then you see, when you have a theory, when you have a model and you keep implementing it and everything just fits into it and works right perfectly into it, and then you take it into a wider net of behavioral evolutionary psychology, cognitive evolutionary psychology is the area of Dr. Adnan, and all the different various fields of natural sciences, everything aligns to the theory of evolution. It's beyond any talk of proving or disproving. I heard one time a scientist say that there are more evidence for the theory of evolution than on the roundness of Earth or that it goes around the sun. It's just beyond that. Like, you have to disprove each one of these millions of pieces of evidence and facts and artifacts and fossils in order for you to implement another model, another theory, disprove this theory.
Wissam, if I can say something, we all go to classrooms, and every classroom you go into it, even in all the countries, you see the periodic table above the board or next to the board, right? This is the chemistry periodic table. Nobody questions that. Nobody say, well, it's based on a theory. It is based on a theory, and so many findings in chemistry are being debated. There is no agreement on some of the findings, but yet we take this, we use it in our lives. Same thing with the theory of evolution. I think evolution, because as a theory in biology, it was lagging behind chemistry in 50, 60 years. Chemistry began much earlier, so people tended to believe it more and to trust its findings. Biology started mainly, especially evolution, in the late 1800s. I want to add also something, Zakir, whatever, Zakir Naik said that, which was completely also not true, is about Darwin. Actually, in his first edition, it was welcomed by the church in England and by everybody for one reason, because he left human beings out of it. He didn't talk about us, about our species. He left it to later editions, and then he wrote a whole book called On the Descent of Man. So we have no problem believing that everybody else evolved and changed and get modified except us. And I go to what Freud famously said, he said that there are three revolutions that destroyed the idea of us being central to the universe. He said the first one was Copernicus. That Copernicus came and said, we just rotate around the sun, and we are just like a planet, like every other planet. So he destroyed our centrality, as being the center of the world or the universe. Darwin came and said, hey, guess what? You're not so special anyways. You evolved like everybody else. There's a process to that. And then Freud, being humble as he is, he said, I'm the third one. I showed you that you don't even control your beliefs and thoughts. You're controlled more by your unconscious, and you're less rational than you think. So those three revolutions destroyed a lot of belief in our specialness. And I think some people still to this moment, even scientific people, refuse to believe it because they want to continue to attach to the idea that we're special.
Yeah, and even if you want to see, like, if you want to see how special we are, there is a way to see it also through science. It has to be a factual way and not a non-factual way. I want to hear from Sohan, starting with the second myth that we want to address. Scientists don't believe in it. I don't understand, where do they get this information from? Like, I understand if he questions the word theory and he plays on that word, but when they bring just a mere falsehood like this, like the simplest research will uncover something different. Poor research, actually, I'm going to share the link in the comments. The Pew Research have actually found that 97%, let me put it here on the monitor, 97% of the scientific community accepts evolution as the dominant scientific theory of biological diversity. Pew Research, and I'm going to leave the comments, the link of this Pew Research in the comments. Sohan, comments on that?
I think Zakir Naik means the scientists who have a PhD in Islamic studies from Al-Azhar, they don't believe in the theory of evolution.
Sohan, comments about that?
Yeah, the evolution really isn't contested by to any serious degree in biology, or really in science in general, and certainly in biology, where it is matters in terms of credentials. I think I don't recall the exact details, but there was some instance where a bunch of scientists who questioned, questioned in terms of human evolution specifically. And that's where the lines are drawn, right? Usually people work back from that depending on the level of commitment to consistency. But for example, recently we had a speaker at MIT who was talking about how mice and rats are closer than chimps and humans, and people are willing to accept that those are different species, but not that humans and chimps are. It's like there's people draw this line kind of arbitrarily, depending on where exactly what makes humans special at the end of the day, right? So that's, I think, what factors big into this. But yeah, there was some scientists who signed this statement about evolution, like questioning, that saying that it isn't all it's cracked up to be. And in response, an evolution advocacy organization found like a bunch of scientists, more scientists than that, but all with the same first name. So who are advocating, the coherent evolution science.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you can find pretty much anyone, a bunch of people with some fringe position in any discipline, but the overwhelming consensus is that evolution is the way things work.
Yeah, Beach Price, she says, Muslim teacher in UK and in Canada got backlash for teaching evolution. Can't imagine how bad it would be in Islamic countries. Yeah, actually, not only in Islamic countries, even in Western countries, unfortunately, among communities that tend to be more religious, or their denominations deny the theory of evolution, because there are some Christian denominations that accept it. There is even some Muslim sects and Muslim schools of thought that accepts it. Ahmadiyya accepts it. Baha'i Islam accept the theory of evolution, and some scholars, they accept the theory of evolution. They don't deny it, among which is Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadlallah, by the way, in Lebanon, who's a major Shia scholar. But the mainstream is still denying of the theory of evolution. Shall we move on to the third myth, which is the myth of well, it's just a hypothesis that there is no proof for it. It
Wissam,
lacks-
if I can add something about
Sure.
what you just said, I think we also cannot lump all Islamic countries in the same group. I was surprised to learn that in Iran they actually do teach evolution. There was a research coming out comparing Iran to Saudi Arabia and Israel, and apparently Iran is more in the liberal end of teaching evolution in elementary, in middle school. Israel was in the middle. Saudi Arabia, of course, we know where they stand. So I'm not sure about other Islamic countries, but I believe that we cannot lump all countries the same, because one thing about evolution, it doesn't tell you how life started. It tells you that life changed. Natural selection is a process where life changes and people can, or species can change. But Darwin never said he figured out how life started. And this is a question left to chemists and biochemists. This is the origin of life. This is the basics of life. So a lot of people don't have a problem believing in evolution because it's a process of change. And they keep the origin of life to God. I think, Sohan, you mentioned Francis Collins, he is one of these people who believe in evolution. He believe in the change, and species, changed into different species. But he still believes that Christ made miracles and that God somehow interfered and blew some soul inside of us. So we don't want to lump all countries in the same category, because there are some countries who do teach it, and I was actually surprised to learn that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, people that go to medicine. Here's the thing. Here's an example. Like I have one of my youngest siblings. She's in med school, and she goes. You go to med school where you can go with, and based on the facilities. But she goes to the undergrad in the university she's a med student in is very deeply Christian, evangelical Christian, not just Catholic or anything. She's evangelical school. And most of the PhDs that are teaching, even in the med school, are pretty religious, and they don't really believe, or they kind of like skip over evolution. They try not to address it. However, even in that school, the genetics professor is almost atheist. He believes, he has to believe in evolution, because without evolution, his entire field goes away. And he happens to be the only medical doctor that's teaching in those subjects. They couldn't get a PhD. They get a PhD because you can get, a lot of these guys are getting PhDs from that same school, right? They're going to that Christian school to get a PhD, and now they're teaching, and they can kind of skirt that line. But they couldn't find within their own, I guess, inner circle of somebody who could teach genetics. And so what my point being is that even in Muslim countries where the Zakir Naik type idea is popular, it's very likely that in their genetics programs, in their med schools, they are teaching genetics, because without it, you cannot teach, or teaching evolution, because you cannot teach genetics without it.
And there will have to be some cognitive dissonance at some stage, because then you'll notice things like, you are more closely related to your brother or your sister than your cousin, or things like that. So you'll notice, like, for example, we talked earlier about 23andMe or other DNA testing and things like that. None of this works unless you accept that this method counts for anything. And by the way, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. Chimps and humans are closer than rats and mice.
That makes more sense. Okay, now I was a little confused. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fourth
But yeah,
myth,
that has to make sense, right? I mean, the methodology is sound. Otherwise, you can't examine the differences among other animal species, and you just become a young Earth creationist at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah.
the fourth myth that he mentioned was missing links, that there were missing links, and that Darwin mentioned the missing links.
I want to actually address that real quick, because he said something else around missing links that brought him to that, and he brought up, Australopithecus, and he brought up Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, and just I want to be clear here. This is how little he knows. Cro-Magnon. First of all, there's a couple of points. Cro-Magnon is Homo sapien. Modern human is Homo sapiens sapien, meaning this concept that Cro-Magnon and humans are different is extremely slight, meaning most likely we could have interbred with Cro-Magnon, and we did, because Cro-Magnon is Homo sapien. The other side of that, he brought up Neanderthal. We know, again, through genetics, that Neanderthal, pre-man, Neanderthal is not a human being as we know it. It is not Homo sapien, or not Homo sapiens sapien. Neanderthal and humans interbred because we were that close than that. And not only that, it answers his question, where is this monkey man he's talking about? He said the monkey man. We killed off all the Neanderthals. Anybody that survival of the fittest, anybody that came across humans, any other, hominid that came across humans, it happened in Europe with Neanderthals in North Africa, and it happened in East Asia. There's some other, I forgot the name of it, but there's another subspecies.
Denisovans.
Right? Huh?
Denisovans.
Yeah, we killed them all. So where are the monkey mans? We murdered them. Human beings murdered them. That's where that's why they're not here. So the missing link, and then you brought up another thing with talking about the museum, and I want to bring that up as well, is the museum, if you go look at the fossil record of just hominids, it's impossible if you just look at it to say, oh yeah, there's a missing link. It has all the links clearly visible to you. What missing link are you talking about?
Right, there are millions of links that are, every single record and discovered species is a link. There's, we are a link. Everyone is a link in the tree of evolution, and I don't understand what they mean by the missing links.
But just look at the skull record. Like, you see the skull gradually change over 100 species. You see them linked in front of you. The New York Museum has a really good one. The New York Natural History Museum. They show you. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I think missing link is an unfortunate word. No scientist uses anymore. This is a word that is completely is based on the assumption that evolution is linear. That evolution is something that goes from single to more complex and it spreads like a tree, while reality and the reality of evolution is actually probably less linear than it is. So we will never actually have any missing links. There are common ancestors more so than missing links. And, the latest common ancestor or the latest finding we have, but that doesn't mean that there are missing links. You can only say there are missing links if you assume evolution is linear, and it's not. Most anthropologists, most psychologists, most paleontologists would tell you that evolution is non-linear. In fact, people say if you go back in time and rerun evolution and start it all over, there's no guarantee we will be here. There's no guarantee. It's all about also chance.
Yeah.
So
probably wouldn't be.
Yeah. Missing link is an unfortunate word. Second, we're never going to get some of the fossils because it's not because of what you said earlier, Johnny, that, some of this is actually degraded and some of it we destroyed. So there will be always things that we cannot get from the fossil. But what we don't have from the fossil record, we have from molecular biology and from genetics, which are more accurate in connecting species and species. There are so many findings that shows you how genetically we diverged, like as you said, like how close we are to monkeys, and how close we are to mice or this or that, and where are the differences exactly, and what could have happened molecularly and genetically for these events to happen. So I always respond to people, when you talk about missing links, you're also forgetting mutation, the role of chance in our evolution.
I think they're more likely or more aptly described as unknown node populations. There are no specific individuals. It all happens at a population level, right? So you can't just say like, oh, this is the one individual who was of this species and gave birth to a creature of a different species. That just doesn't happen. Yeah. It's just like you take along this long, this path along the evolutionary tree, and you take individuals hundreds of thousands of years apart, or even thousands of years apart, and you'll find, they're not similar. That doesn't mean there's something missing in between. We know what happened here.
That's a good point. I was going to say something and I don't remember what it was.
I'm going to show you in a minute a 6-minute video from the Natural History Museum in New York, because the way it's designed, and I visited that exhibition of evolution, which is a huge exhibition. You probably need a day to do it really thoughtfully. And that's only that exhibition, just one exhibition. The way they've did it, like they made the exhibition in the shape of the tree of life. It's just the most engaging, interactive way of understanding the theory of evolution. It's a wonderful.
I remember one thing I wanted to bring up before you show the video is the idea of for this missing link, right? The idea, the goalposts, right? The goalpost always changes, right? First, people would say if fish evolved into land species, well, where's the fish with legs? And then when you find the fish with legs, they say something else. They say, well, the fish with legs, where's the one that has the tail disappear? And then you find that in the fossil record. And then they go, okay, the goalpost constantly changes. So where's the monkey man? Well, what about Neanderthal? Okay, well, where's this XYZ? They're always going to find a way to poke a hole because they're invested in not believing. There's a financial benefit for them, or there's a power benefit. Zakir Naik is a great example. This guy's got 3 million followers. You said there's a power that he has from denying this stuff and saying the stuff he says. So excited about this video.
I have to prepare it in 1 second. But before we conclude on the myths, I want to address the last myth that he mentioned, which is the myth, and we've heard that a lot too, the myth of where are the intermediaries? Why don't we see? That's what he said in his talk. Like, why don't we see the half monkey, half man? Totally misunderstanding of evolution. It's like telling a human that you were a child and then you became an adult, but where is that intermediary?
Where's the teenager? Where's the teenager? Yeah.
Between child and this, I mean, it's just something that shows a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of the theory of evolution. But when it's massive, when it's a massive way of thinking, this is the danger of it, the science illiteracy. There is no excuse for it today. I mean, our curiosity should be, and the globalization,
we have the fossils of the monkey man. We have that fossil. I mean, it's there. Not monkey, ape, more ape-like, right? The humans that were less modern human. It's there. We have the fossil. I mean, even though you don't need that fossil to show what you're saying. Like, everything you're saying is absolutely true. Everything, Adnan, what you said, absolutely true. You don't need those things because all the gaps can be filled in with so much additional information. But we have it nonetheless.
But to respond to what Wissam said about the intermediaries, how do you say it? I agree with you. It's just fascinating because people cannot wrap their head around the idea that evolution takes millions of years. You're talking about, we've been on Earth as the beginning of life. What now? 2 billion years? 2.5
3 billion years.
3
Cambrian
billion
explosion.
years, you know, and you just can't fathom and wrap your head around it. So you can't imagine it.
Life started soon after the conditions for life were readily available. It just took another billion years before the Cambrian explosion, where evolution really kicked off. Like for a billion years, there was very little evolution, or maybe there was, but life was very one-celled, and it lived in a certain kind of pattern for a long time.
Yes.
And then climate change, or what else have you? Maybe there was a meteor strike, the moon forming, right? These things changed the conditions enough to the right way where it kicked off evolution. And the billions upon billions of speciation since that time is unbelievable.
And the idea how species become, speciation is called, is very complicated to the point, it doesn't work like people imagine it, like you have something in the middle, and then it actually, it's just very fascinating if you're interested in learning more about it, is how the speciation happens and how they separate,
right,
because of changes and environmental pressures. And they move to different
human being. It's just impossible for there to be the chicken and the egg problem doesn't exist in it, because it takes time. Such minor changes happen that you don't see speciation happen within a single or even 10 generations. It takes a long time for it to kind of happen.
But we see it in fruit flies. We see it in a lot of small things, and it's amazing. You can see it within a few generations.
In bacteria,
we see it in Corona, for sure.
Corona, take the coronavirus.
The vast majority of life forms of species that have ever existed are extinct, right? People are looking at the arch, right, after the scaffolding has been erected and the arch has been and the arch exists, like, based on the scaffolding goes away, and people are thinking, well, how does the arch exist? It's like that, it's like all the species that led up to this point are all wasted away. They're all extinct. So I mean, we're not going to find intermediaries now. It's like asking where's the intermediate? Where's the half me, half my dad? Doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
Beach says 95% have gone extinct. Actually, I've even read Beach that it says over 99% that went extinct. And also there is a comment that you mentioned earlier that, where is it? So there's about 11 species of hominids. Actually, I've read recently about 21 species of hominids. I'm gonna share the link of a very, very popular YouTube channel of a scientist that says she's really good at explaining and answering questions about the theory of evolution. The final question, because we're over an hour now, I will ask after the video, is how can we stop the rejection of the theory of evolution, especially in our Muslim communities? One of the audience asked, "Are you Muslims?" Although this is, a personal question, many of us we reckon ourselves as Muslimish, and this is where Muslimish opens up the space for questioning.
We're that half in between,
Mr.
Half,
Terminate.
We're in between atheist and Muslim, that's the evolutionary point in between.
Transitional fossils.
We're the missing link.
The missing links.
Okay. So we actually Muslimish allows a space for people to recognize themselves as Muslims in some things, and recognize themselves as non-Muslims in other things. So the space where, and this cat is also one of the missing links. Listen, if you live in the United States of America, you must visit New York one day, and if you visit New York, you must visit the Natural History Museum. Please go through this, which I consider I haven't seen. I mean, I've been to the Natural History Museum in Britain, the Darwin Museum even. The best one I've seen so far is really New York, and the way it explains the theory of evolution. Here's a video about how the museum itself is shaped walking through the museum itself explains the theory of evolution. And this tree is shaped into the hallways of the museum, where you see the species that branched out from every tree, who remained, and who went extinct. Of course, not in all details, but examples of each in the museum, which is amazing, because these intermediaries, they still exist. There are species that are intermediaries. They go back millions of years, and they still exist today. They were intermediaries between one species and another. Even, for example, the evolution of the eye is in itself, you'll see its evolution, and the intermediaries who still have these evolving eye, they still exist. There are species with at various stages of the evolving eye. So to wrap up this episode, with the question, we have Mr. Terminate, YouTube user, who's been presenting some. He said that he's an Orthodox Muslim, and he believes in the theory of evolution, but he's presenting some questions and doubts about some of the details of the theory. I invite you, because we are out of time today, I invite you for next week, Wednesday. We have an important guest, and thank you, Sohan, for arranging for that episode. Let me display it right on the screen. We have a very hot topic, very important topic, called Islamic creationism, the Turkish model. Professor Taner Edis, the professor of physics from Truman State University, he will be presenting this topic next week on Wednesday, February 23rd, at the same time as today's episode. So please be with us, and I will give you time to speak and basically present your points with the professor as much as you want. Now, to come to the end of this episode with this question, I would like to start with Dr. Adnan Jaber answering it. How do we stop the rejection of the theory of evolution?
I think arranging field trips to the museum is the first thing we could do, and I'm not joking about that. I've been with people at the museum who were devout Muslims, and you can see how they were having hard time coming to terms with all the fossils, all the records, and that they were witnessing. So that's why we have a creation museum, because these people, wanted to counter what the museum showed. So I think you counter these things with facts. Museums are based on facts, based on curators, based on people who show evidence, and making this part of our life and taking trips to such museums will be helpful. In our countries, I don't know. I mean, this is a tough call, because most of these countries are based on centralized governments who decides the curriculum and decides what's taught. And as I think all of you said today, there are a lot of power dynamics involved in these questions, and people want to keep holding to their power, and they accrue power by creating this I think myth that there is this tension, that we should always fight against those people who are trying to ruin our creed or religion. So I think we could start just these episodes can help publishing them, countering the myth and the dogma by sharing books. I can't believe how many people I shared with them books from Dawkins, and they were really, really happy to be able to read them and learn from them. So we can do our part by actually sharing information and knowledge. As countries, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a long way for these countries to start shifting, But eventually, that they can't resist for that long.
Thank you, Dr. Adnan. Suhan, final comments.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize the applications, like pointing out, for example, the use in development of medicine, of like customized drugs and DNA, family testing, 23andMe, and all these things. How these just like we use GPS to show that relativity is actually being used right now. We can in the same way do that, and we can also use that to show people that this has practical applications, and this is something you could build a career from, and that career depends on you properly understanding these concepts.
Johnny?
Yeah, I think the number one thing we need to do is stop trying to make it a choice between believe in your religion and accepting evolution. I think there's these guys that Adnan brought up, the power dynamics. There's a power in trying to keep the two, mutually exclusive. Inclusive. They're exclusive. You can believe in a creator of the universe, but what creator of the universe is more powerful? A creator that creates a set of rules that start from a point, the Big Bang, and give us the diversity that we see and the miracle of existence, or somebody who hand molded in clay and poked little eye holes and created the penis of a human being and then used the rib of that human being to create. What is a more powerful belief, right? And I think trying to separate religion from evolution, I don't think you need to do it. I don't think you need that. And the problem that Adnan, you brought up is, how do we go back to our own countries where we originate from ethnically and help these people? I think the fact is that there's at play politically to keep them under dominance, the dichotomy of these two things, to say that if you want to believe in Allah, then you cannot believe in evolution, or vice versa. If you believe in evolution, then how can you believe in God? And I don't think, Terminate's an example. My father, I keep looking at my father. He's a NASA physicist. He was a PhD in physics, and he had no problem believing in a quote unquote creator. He believed in Allah, and he believed in evolution, and he believed in science and physics, and he thought that there's probably alien life out there, with the fact that there's an infinite universe, or close to infinite, at least from our perceptual point of view. And I think that's a very key thing that needs to happen, is that we don't need to separate the two. And I think religious people who are devout, Adnan, bringing them to the museum is great. You can still be devout and believe, and not even believe, accept evolution.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I want to add to that, Johnny, is that the first thing to really to face science is to understand that whatever we have developed methodologies to know facts, and we have to start from facts. Now, religion has to do with faith, with more consciousness, the spiritual, the our the behavior, our social interactions, and these two things are not necessarily contradictory.
There's something
with
that stuck
each
out to
other.
me. I read a quote, and I'm probably misquoting it significantly and where it comes from, but I think it was from the golden age, the quote unquote golden age of Islam, right? And it was somebody who was studying the stars, right? And I'm paraphrasing significantly, especially since he didn't speak English, but that the idea was, our job here on earth, the Quran only tells you so much, but the Quran says the evidence lies around you, right? Is what he's trying to say. And the evidence of evolution is there. So the evidence lies around you. These preachers, Zakir Naik, they're making a definitive statement that has no basis in their faith, in their religion, and in their scripture. They're making these definitive statements about evolution. But this guy, he said, my job is to study the creation, to understand what God put upon us. He's essentially doing exactly what you said. He's looking at the facts, and then he's saying, this facts that I'm seeing is God's creation, right? And like I said before, like, you don't need to separate the two. If that's what makes you feel good in your heart to believe in a God, if that's what fulfills your life, then have that. But you have to still examine the facts, and the facts say these things. And I don't see anything in religion that actually contradicts the facts. I think I see preachers that contradict the facts.
Yes, but I think also there are certain, for example, verses in the Quran that talks about, God's wisdom in creating certain things, and they might not align with science. And what I want to say is,
fair enough, but they're conjecturing.
Quran is not necessarily a book of science, and it's not obligated to be scientifically accurate or correct. It is more of a book of guidance. That's what it wants to be, and that's how we should treat it. It's more of a book that speaks poetically to the human soul. And this is a way for a Muslim, this is a way for a Muslim that want to accept science, at the same time not feeling that they have to reject their religion or faith or Quran in that sense. So
there's plenty of other things in the Quran other than this to reject it for.
Exactly. Which, that's on a different topic. But so at the end, I want to thank our panel and our audience. I want to remind you again of the important topic that we will introduce next Wednesday, which is Islamic creationism, the Turkish model. We will be able to discuss it with the scientist directly who has studied this topic. And at the end, also, I want to say on Darwin's Day that let us find ourselves inspired to stretch our minds with questions that test our limits. Let us champion the values of intellectual bravery, perpetual curiosity, and hunger for truth. Let us honor scientific thinkers like Darwin, not just in our laboratories, but in the practice of nurturing compassionate, egalitarian communities that value free inquiry. Let us work to grow our understanding of the interconnectedness of all life and expand our empathy and the reach of our compassion. And like Darwin himself, let us take daring risks for a freer, fairer, more joyful world. Without further ado, I want you to enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy Darwin Day. Thank you again for our panel for your open discussion and on openness and sharing your personal and scientific mind. And meet us again in the upcoming episodes of Muslimish Freethinkers. This episode will be available on Spotify and iTunes as a voice podcast, and it's all available immediately after the end of the episode on YouTube and Facebook. Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Muslimish Freethinkers. Do let us know what you think of this episode at facebook.com/Muslimish. Don't forget to visit us at muslimish.org.